June 11th, 2020, Sony revealed their addition to the 9th generation of consoles, the PlayStation 5. Along with it, new features such as adaptive triggers, faster loading times, and of course, new games to coincide with the launch on November 12th. One of the first games shown being a sequel to Marvel's Spider-Man, but not quite the Spider-Man 2 people may have been anticipating, but more of a side story following Miles Morales in his journey to become Spider-Man. I know a lot of people were slightly disappointed when this was revealed alongside the launch of the PS5, and didn't end up being the fully fledged sequel people were waiting for, and I have to admit, it did have me wondering how much longer we'd have to wait for Spider-Man 2 if we were being given this side story in its place. But now, as this video is most likely being uploaded on the release of that highly anticipated game, I'm glad it exists. The development and background we get for Miles and his supporting cast will more than likely allow for Spider-Man 2 to seamlessly act as a sequel to both of their stories without feeling like it has a ton to catch up on with Miles. We get to see and play the origin of him coming into his own as Spider-Man. Development for this game seems to have taken some cues from Uncharted Lost Legacy, where that game started out as DLC for Uncharted 4, but spun out into its own budget-priced game. Spider-Man Miles Morales seems to have been built this way from the start, as if Sony really wanted a Spider-Man project ready for the PS5's release. In America, the title on its own was $50, $10 less than the standard $60, but over here in Australia, the game released at $90, $10 more than the standard $80 that we had at the time. There is a completely separate conversation there about the way Australia prices games, but for the sake of this video, Miles Morales was being sold around standard price. This started, or rather continued, a pretty heavy debate among the gaming community surrounding playtime versus price. How long does a game have to be worth its price? And how much does playtime contribute to the overall value of a game? I've played some short games over the years that are well worth their time, and some long games that weren't. So obviously that's not the only metric here. But the question here is, does Miles Morales have enough to satiate players? I think personally it comes down to how much you like playing these Spider-Man games. You need to want to complete Miles Morales' story and side content to get your money's worth. The main story is far too short, with only 17 missions to Marvel Spider-Man's 44. Granted, some of those missions in Marvel Spider-Man wouldn't be considered full main missions, but I think the gap remains fairly large. Even the City Never Sleeps DLC had a total of 26 missions, so yeah, Miles Morales is very short in comparison to the previous game. But is the content we do get of the highest quality? The answer is mostly. In terms of broad mechanics brought over from the previous game, it fine-tunes and adjusts an already amazing foundation with its swinging and combat, though some glitches do fall down the cracks. It's clear in the scope of this game that it wasn't going out of its way to change a whole lot. We get to see most of these changes the moment the story starts. As if it's paying tribute to that one E3 demo from years ago, the game chooses to blend its main menu into the start of the story, a trend that I don't think I'll ever get sick of. Miles is strolling through his neighborhood of Harlem, where in which he moved following the events of the last game, helping the various residents, including a street artist who swings one way when it comes to choosing their favorite Spider-Man. Eventually, Miles is called to action by Peter as they are surveying the transport of former prisoners back to their home in the raft, including one of a larger stature. After their guest of honor manages to break free, we're once again taken through the basics of the game. The game doesn't spend too much time on this, assuming that this is your second go around with an Insomniac Spidey game. I'm pretty sure you could even turn these off in the options, but of course, I forgot to. Eventually, Miles joins the chase with Peter to take down an awfully persistent rhino, a cute set piece that has you riding him through the mall. I find it cool how if Miles is to fail his QuickTime events, Peter comes in at the last second to do whatever it was for him. It's a nice little story bit that'll add a bit to subsequent playthroughs for players curious enough to see what happens when you fail them. After the chase ends up in a nearby Roxxon plant, Peter is knocked out and Miles awakens a new power that lay dormant inside of him.
Bro. Jack? The hell?
This bioelectricity takes down the Rhino in the form of a quick boss battle, and the two Spider-Man leave him in the hands of Roxxon guards. One of the first things your keen eye may notice while playing is that despite racking up focus, your finishes are instead tied to your combos. That's because Miles' newly dubbed Venom electricity powers now use the built-up focus bars. Starting at one focus bar also feels pretty limiting coming from having 3 most of the last game, but I suppose that just comes with starting a new game. Miles and Peter reconvene, but Peter tells him he'll be going on vacation vacation for a few weeks, leaving the young hero as the one and only Spider-Man while he's gone. This comes as a bit of a shock to Miles, who feels as if he's only really begun to scratch the surface with becoming Spider-Man, not to mention the emergence of his new powers. He leaves Miles with a parting gift, and he's officially taken off the training wheels. We meet up with Genki, Miles' best friend from school, and we open Peter's gift.
How's it looking? Whoa.
Look, it's not the best looking suit, and it screams Spider-Man Jr., but hey, it's a start. We are then directed to a nearby challenge box that looks eerily similar to a Taskmaster or Screwball mission, but luckily, no. Instead, in this game, Peter is the one narrating the challenges.
I knew you'd save me, Spider-Man.
These range from combat, traversal, and stealth, and will each unlock specific skills in your new skill tree. The combat challenges are probably the most standard, wanting you to use specific moves as much as possible within a time limit. The traversal challenges are fairly standard, but with the web swinging being as fun as it is, they're always welcome. Especially the last one that lets you freestyle the rings in whichever order you'd like. The stealth challenges are definitely the most different in comparison to the previous game. Miles eventually unlocks a camouflage power, which gives him temporary invisibility. This and the new, admittedly less useful gadgets make stealth quite a bit different than Spider-Man 1. Once again, I don't think it's quite to the level it thinks it is. There is some tweaking that could still happen in the future to make Spider-Man stealth a little more seamless. I do admit though, the amount of successful stealth encounters I had playing fast and instinctively proves that they are at least heading in the right direction. At least for me. Maybe a quicker and more effective way of seeing which enemies are safe could help, as I found that too many times they'd switch from safe at the last second, ruining my chance at quietly taking out every enemy. On his way home, Miles takes a detour and discovers a new faction of enemies poised to make moves across the city, that being the Underground. These bright purple criminals use a type of programmable matter that lets them jump high, run fast, spawn weapons, and take more hits than a regular human. Miles quickly realizes, however, that their unique tech is especially weak to his venom electricity, so storing up some of that against these guys is a must. During his sleuthing, he discovers that the Underground are targeting Roxxon, specifically shipments of New Form, a new, clean energy being developed under the management of Simon Krieger. It's clear from the get-go that this guy is a shady business type, but it's also clear the Underground aren't so squeaky clean either, which begins one of the problems I have with Miles Morales' story. It is way too similar to the 2018 original. Let me quickly skim through the plot points and characters, and you tell me whether it sounds familiar. We have our smart inventor type with a personal connection to our protagonist, who is wanting to get back at big business rich guy for the part he played in ruining their life, which included a lab accident, or not so accident, that caused the death of an innocent person / people. We also have a creation that was invented for the good of mankind, yet instead makes people sick. Lots of various cosmetically similar things, like the Underground being demons, Roxxon being Sable. The point is, it's a bit derivative. I'm not sure how much time they had to work on the plot, but it seems that for the sake of getting a product out on time, certain corners were cut. We return home and have a really nice story mission there. Lots of cool details, like being able to choose a record and have unique lines of dialogue for each one. Even though it's simple, these type of things again make for surprising replays. I know for some players, a single playthrough is enough to experience a game. For me though, a game that I can return to again and again is worth more than something I'll play once and never touch again. This is one of the reasons that, though the game falls short in its runtime compared to the other titles in the franchise, I still believe Miles Morales is worth its price tag. This review marks my third playthrough of the game, and I doubt it'll be my last. My 3 playthroughs of a game obviously trump a single playthrough from someone else, but it doesn't necessarily make their opinion invalid either. If someone says they didn't find it worth the investment, that's really up to them. Let's talk about the new characters from this game, some of which we'll be seeing again in Spider-Man 2. There's Genki, the guy in the chair who stays on call to guide and help you. If you're familiar with Ned from the Home trilogy, you already know the type of character Genki is. We also meet Finn, an old friend who lost touch for a few months when Miles moved. Hardcore Spider-Man fans would have already clued on to her name, Finn Mason, being quite close to Phineas Mason, the Tinkerer from the comics. So no surprise there when she turns out to be the Tinkerer in this universe as well, though quite a different interpretation. I have things I like and dislike with her portrayal, but I'll go a little more into detail with her later. The next day, Genki implements a new app into your suit that'll allow you to track crimes and requests for help around the city. This is one of the best quality of life additions that I'm glad will be making a return in the sequel. Some other additions that are very welcome is the ability to change the time of day / weather from the menu, rather than trekking to one of Harry Osborn's labs. The game also has a few visual modes to choose from. There's Fidelity, which includes ray tracing and the best visuals, Performance, which removes ray tracing and other visual enhancements to reach 60 frames per second, and Performance RT, which adds back the ray tracing, but I found to be a little less stable than the vanilla performance mode. I opted for Performance since the game doesn't suffer too much visually in this mode, whereas 60 frames per second versus 30 is not a competition for me. Back to the crimes. It was always an issue when you were waiting for a specific crime to spawn in the base game, only to go through about 10 of them to get to the one you really need for completion. With the Friendly Neighborhood app, you can simply spawn the crime you want to complete at will. Crimes will still naturally occur to maintain the illusion, but you can't deny it's great to have that flexibility from the touch of a button. One of the first users of the app is Miles' uncle, Aaron Davis, aka the Prowler. He quickly guesses Miles' identity, claiming to guess it from news footage he saw a day earlier. Yeah, I don't know about that one. Meeting up with Finn again, we get to collect our first of the many time capsules of the game, this game's version of the backpacks. Once again, just like the paintings of the DLC, the time capsules don't quite reach the height of the backpacks. But the lore surrounding Finn and Miles' relationship is certainly a joy to uncover. Plus, this big wheel Easter egg is pretty funny too.
After we won that science enterprise, Finn got way into space exploration. Dreamed up this moon transport. She wanted to reinvent the whole world.
During a campaign rally for Rio Morales, who is running for councilwoman of Harlem, the Underground attack the Roxxon guards stationed there. You join the fight, where it eventually ends up on the bridge, as Underground goons attempt to steal Newform. Miles discovers Finn's secret, and then all hell breaks loose. The bridge collapses with Miles partially to blame. Roxxon guards attempt to attack him, but Miles discovers a second hidden power: camouflage. As I said before, the camo mechanic does add some interesting strategy to the stealth segments, and can help you take a breather if enemy damage is becoming too much. The suit that Peter made for Miles, though, doesn't fare well after this mission. We're treated to a montage, and we finally get to see Miles don his classic look.
See it coming, I don't need a sign. Just a moment, I'ma make it mine. This is my sign.
Armed with the knowledge about Finn, Miles takes it upon himself to dig around her brother's old workshop. It's through this mission that we discover not only that Rick Mason had died, but how. Miles also meets up with the Prowler, revealed to him as his uncle. This interpretation of Aaron Davis doesn't try to change too much from the Spider-Verse version. However, spoilers for Spider-Verse if you haven't seen it. Unlike that version, this one is still alive, so we may get to see some development from this version that we won't see in the Spider-Verse films, so that's somewhat exciting. By now we have all 3 gadgets that Miles has access to in the game. It's a poor choice in comparison to the previous game, and I think they could have done with the passover of maybe impact webbing or web bombs, since they were sorely missed in this game. But hey, maybe in the sequel they'll beef up Miles' arsenal to include a few of the older gadgets. The holo drones will keep enemies busy, beating them slowly. The remote mine can be used as an easy one kill, or attached to a generator to greatly expand its radius to knock out several enemies, or the gravity well. It's a little more bombastic than actually useful, but can drag enemies to a spot more suitable for you in a pinch. It can also do this. After this mission, you unlock one of the 2 enemy bases in the game. They work largely the same as the last game, with an extra collectible hidden around. These tech chests that really want to emulate the feeling of cracking open a chest from God of War. The Roxxon labs have got a cool aesthetic, even if the enemies themselves remind me a little too much of the Sable agents, but the underground hideouts are simply reused Fisk construction sites. Sure, there's graffiti to indicate new ownership, but it still feels slightly cheap. You unlock these in the following mission, when Miles convinces Finn to let him join the Underground. This plan eventuates in Miles being forced to reveal his identity to Finn, hoping he can salvage communication and put everything on the table to fix their problems. It doesn't quite go to plan. Uncle Aaron has been giving pretty terrible advice throughout the game, putting strain on their relationship. He does, however, give us our next collectible. Aaron and Miles' father, Jeff, would go around sampling the sounds of the city, and planned to make one of the sickest beats in the world using them. We get some more information regarding Aaron's double life as the thief, the Prowler, as well as how it affected his relationship with his brother. Finally, after the last sample is collected, we're able to visit the studio and be treated to this masterpiece of music. not gonna beat a dead horse and drone on about how bad this beat is. Let's just settle with calling it Rare Insomniac L. I won't force you to listen to any more of it. Eventually, Aaron sells out your location to Roxxon in an attempt to catch Finn but protect you. Though, as they drop a heavily fortified familiar face, it's clear they're taking you in too. Let me just say, this betrayal would sting a whole lot more if I hadn't listened to that moldy beat yet. We unlock the last in a handful of special Venom attacks, a 3-bar cost massive AoE attack that also heals you. Some other Venom attacks include a Venom Punch, Venom Jump, Venom Dash, Venom Smash. Basically, if you hold L1 and press square, triangle, X, or any combo of them, you're likely to do a Venom attack. These are incredibly fun to use, and as you upgrade your skills, frankly, you become overpowered. I talked about how hard Ultimate difficulty was in the regular game in my last video. However, in Miles Morales, if you start Ultimate through the New Game Plus method, your powers are more than enough to trivialize most of the game. I think the difficulty through a standard game, though, is almost perfect. It doesn't quite have the spike the first game had, but I'd say the experience feels a little more balanced throughout. I just wish Ultimate accounted for the amount of power you have at your disposal from the very beginning. We have a cool boss fight with Rhino, which has you switching between throwing and punching him to rid Rhino of his Roxxon upgrades, only to absolutely demolish him with your Venom powers once you do. Finn and Miles have a bit of a miscommunication, and she's back to being the big bad. Let's talk a bit about Finn. I largely don't mind that her character arc mirrors that of Dr. Octopus, though apart from the spectacle of a scene that comes with her eventual sacrifice, the differences she has don't particularly come across as positives for me. Her stubbornness, though understandable from a human perspective, becomes increasingly annoying as she pretends as if Miles betrayed her by not telling her he was Spider-Man right away, whereas Miles had to figure out she was the Tinkerer himself. I know some may argue her hypocritical nature makes her human and compelling as a villain, but when so many of her issues could be solved by simply spending some time with Miles, I don't see myself feeling that bad for her when things go wrong. She's way too quick to viciously turn on Miles, her childhood friend, who clearly wants nothing but the best for her. But even when all of Harlem is at stake, she still can't find it in herself to give Miles a quick listen. Though Miles wasn't totally the best at speaking to her either. They end up separated as Finn decides to continue her suburban sacrifice of a plan, while Miles goes to stop her, where we're interrupted by the Prowler, in a scene not too dissimilar to Taskmaster catching you in the previous game. The boss fight with the Prowler is really fun, and I wish we got more of these one-on-one fights with colourful villains, as we really only get the Rhino twice, the Prowler, and the final boss, the Tinkerer. It's aggressive and really chaotic, and rewards quick thinking as you deal with his holographic clones. And you can also pretend that this is revenge for what he thinks is a sick beat. Once we're done with that, we get to play through an extended flashback, complete with a cameo from Peter Parker and Otto Octavius. I don't know how necessary this was, but I will admit, it's nice seeing them both together again, if even just in the past. After fighting off some more underground members, we rush back to Harlem to confront Finn, but not without helping the people of Harlem reach safety. If you played through a lot of the side quests throughout the game, you will probably recognize a lot of the people you save during the climax. The payoff from learning these people's names, struggles, and livelihoods makes Harlem feel like a fully living and breathing character. I know it sounds like it may be a big stretch, but I hope that one day they can improve and implement this type of natural humanization across the entire overworld, because even though there were plenty of civilian side quests in the previous game, I don't remember any of their names, but I can tell you about Teo and his cat Spider-Man, I can tell you about Caleb and his barbershop, and of course the street artist Haley, who Miles seems to really like. This game took what little time it had and truly fleshed out Harlem as its own entity, and it makes the end of the game hit just that much harder. A final boss fight between Spider-Man and the Tinkerer occurs, a fight that goes through about 3 phases before finally finishing. It's a fun, if not slightly long fight that ends with Finn realizing the damage she is about to cause Harlem. Miles absorbs the power of the reactor. With nowhere to go in his eventual exploding state, Finn rushes over and takes him above the buildings, releasing the energy within him, disintegrating her, but saving the city. As Miles lies with his face bared to the people he saved over the last couple of weeks, the people of Harlem step in to protect him, calling him their own personal Spider-Man.
That guy? He's our Spider-Man.
Miles mirrors himself weeks prior, but this time Harlem knows and appreciates him for what he does. honouring him as a true Spider-Man. In the post-game, you're given a unique side quest to do, where you collect postcards and listen to voice recordings of Miles' late father. I hope we see some more post-game missions in the sequel, because I always find it fascinating to play in the world beyond the story. Other side missions throughout the game include saving Spider-Man the cat, which earns you this very unique suit, which even has its own finisher animation, as well as a chain of quests that ends with a tease for Kingpin's return, or possibly the revelation that Miles stopped his return before he could achieve it. Who's to say? Obviously, Miles also has a handful of suits to collect, though a smaller amount compared to his counterpart. Personal favourites include the aforementioned Spider-Cat suit, the animated suit, Purple Rain suit, Morales 2020 suit, and of course, the Spider-Verse suit. This suit also comes with a couple mods for your suit and visor, the mods being a more passive replacement to the suit powers. These mods can be switched around to cater to your playstyle, or you can waste 2 slots to really feel like you're in the Spider-Verse. Air tricks are also back from the previous game. They are mainly just for show, as you'd expect, but they can be useful for building up focus as you traverse through the city. It's also kind of funny when you trick a little too close to the ground. So the burning question is Miles Morales worth its money? I'll reiterate what I said before and say what I think applies to most games. It depends on how much you're going to play it. In 5 years, when Spider-Man 3 or Miles Morales 2 is announced, you can be sure I'll show up to my 4th playthrough. Hell, I might even play a 5th time just for fun, because that's all this is about, isn't it? To break these creations into numbers, calculating the time and quantity of content begins to miss the point with what games actually are. Ultimately, I think Insomniac had to make choices when it came to what they were able to deliver. Yes, we can always wish for them to have more time, but the gaming industry is a business after all. One thing I will point out is that glitches were fairly common for this game. I don't know whether I'll be able to find this clip, but I remember seeing someone swinging around as a block of concrete at one point. I do, however, have a clip courtesy of my friend, where a trapped Roxxon guard continued to make this ear-piercing sound well after he had left the room he was in, bleeding its way into cutscenes, and by extension, his experience.
But Spider-Man's the best leverage I got against Miss Mason. I mean, you caught them together. Well, I mean, you caught them, but it was thanks to your intel, so clearly there's something going on there.
Stuff like that I feel should be weighed a little more heavily when voting with our wallets, because it seems like yesterday that people were excusing the mountain of glitches in their favourite games if it meant that they were getting an 80-hour plus experience. So yeah, Miles Morales was worth it to me. If they ever choose to do a sequel to this game specifically as a side story, I do hope us Australians don't end up paying more than we should. Thank you for tuning into my Spider-Man Miles Morales review. By the time you're watching this, hell, the minute this uploads, I'll already be picking up my 19-inch deluxe collector's edition of Spider-Man 2, itching to dive in straight away. I haven't decided whether to review Spider-Man 2 right away or possibly allow for a second playthrough. I suppose I'll let you guys decide. All I know is that video will definitely be coming sooner rather than later. If you want to be ready for that upload and my others coming down the pipeline as we speak, subscribe down below, and I'd like to thank you for watching DaAcorn.